Hello and welcome to this review of this Sony's HXR-NX100 camcorder. It is a low-cost, ultra-low-cost in fact, full HD camcorder in, as you can see, the sort of news-gathering, run-and-gun, point-and-shoot sort of form factor, but with all the manual controls you want. Now, this was introduced, I think it was only about 3 months ago or so, but already it's been named by one of the very well-regarded YouTube channels that I'm a big fan of, the Camera Store TV. They named this the third worst camcorder introduced in 2015. Now, I disagree with that, and I'm going to come to my reasons why. But what they essentially said is that it doesn't shoot 4K, and they don't really see the point of it, and so they dismissed it as being no good. Well, guys, if you're watching, I think you have missed the point of this, and I think it does have a place. Now, I've already stated it is an ultra low-cost camcorder. This style of unit from Sony a few years ago would start at least £3,000. I remember my Z5 camcorder was, I think, £3,300. The Z1 was in the same ballpark, and the ones above that, PMW 200, things like that, they were £5 plus. This is selling, and I have just checked the prices, it's selling for £1,300, just under £1,300, including VAT, the sales tax. That means it's actually about £1,000 before tax. Now, that pricing is, as you can imagine, just above the sort of top level of consumer camcorder that you'd buy in a high street shop. And for that money, you are getting a unit that is much more flexible and usable if you are someone who likes to actually take control of the camcorder and press buttons and be able to use it professionally, if you like, rather than just point or shoot something which you take on holiday with you. So throughout this review, I just want you to remember that criticisms that I will have of it aside, it's selling for a remarkably low price. Now, it is HD, it does not do 4K. There is no plan apparently by Sony for it to do 4K. And Sony themselves are quite clear about who this camcorder is aimed at. It's for the education market, it's for students, it is, one would imagine, for enthusiastic amateurs and semi-pro people. It also quite clearly, I think, has a market in video journalism, videography, things like that. Anyone doing web video, anyone doing corporate video. I don't mean the sort of big budget professional corporate video. If you've got a marketing department in-house and you want to do some filming of your company, put a message from the CEO up on the internet or the website, this is an ideal camcorder to use if you don't want to be faffing around with that whole DSLR business of different lenses and mucking about with split audio. It's a pick it up, run and gun, go with it kind of camcorder. So let me show you round it first of all, because there are some compromises, but all in all I still maintain it's quite a nice little unit. Let's start at the front, where, as you can see, one of my pet hates, it has a removable lens cap. These things, they come off, you drop them, you lose them. Now, bigger and more expensive Sony camcorders have a little switch on the side of the hood here which opens and closes a flap in front of the lens. That is a much better arrangement, and you can see that the old sort of old style lens cap is clearly a bit of a cost-cutting measure, but okay, we'll live with that and just be careful perhaps. It's a Sony G Lens. I've never really known what this G stands for, but it's a type of fixed integrated lens they put on a lot of their smaller camcorders like this. You've got the usual 3 rings for control. The front one here is for focus, nice and big, very grippy. It's got this sort of rubberized textured finish to it, very easy to get hold of, and as I will come to, actually very easy to get focus with this as well. Next one back is your zoom ring. I never use that, preferring instead to use the zoom rocker or an external lank controller, which this will accept. And then the last one here is, of course, your iris control. Now, the lens is f2.8, ramping down to f4 as you zoom, which is okay, and again, that's something I will come back to. The optical zoom is 12 times, but it has this system that's now prevalent on many Sony camcorders and stills cameras as well, this clear image zoom, where there are so many pixels on the sensor that by cropping in on the sensor, effectively you get a zoom which isn't really a zoom, but you're not losing any pixel resolution. And more than that, Sony say they do some sort of clever interpolation on the image, and it sort of analyzes the picture to give you the best zoom you can get. I'm not a big fan of clear image zoom. I didn't like it on their smaller consumer camcorders, but it's there if you want it. So 12 times optical, 24 times if you switch the clear image zoom on. Behind that, it all looks fairly standard. If you've ever used one of these Sony camcorders before, you've got ND filters here, 3 positions and off, which of course is great. It means that this is a run and gun camcorder. This is for shooting news and things that are happening in front of you that you can't be faffing about with lens changes for. So if you are shooting inside, ND off, let as much light in as possible, then you run outside and it's all very bright. Well, you can just easily switch in however much ND you need with just the flick of a switch. Again, no mucking about with screwing filters on the front or adjusting variable NDs or any of that nonsense. So that's very handy. You've got an auto manual focus button should the desperate need arise that you want to autofocus. Equally, auto iris button here, and they're both together so you know where they are, very conveniently placed. Buttons down here for gain, white balance, shutter speed, and a simple full auto if you really must just put the camera into auto for that shot which you really need to get and haven't got time to faff about. Now, this is again one of the little cost-cutting things here. On the bigger camcorders, what you would usually have here is a little 3-position toggle switch, an A, B, and a C, and you would preset what you want those to be. So for example, for gain, you might have a low position of 0, high of 6, and a medium of 3, or whatever. You can set them in the menus. You don't get that here. You do get a button you can press that makes gain the active function, and then use this little toggle to go up and down through the values. On the one hand, it's not as quick to just flick a switch onto the gain position you want. On the other hand, it is more flexible, because the trouble with having a switch with specified positions is that if you suddenly want a little bit more, you've got to faff about in the menus to increase it. At least with this one, you can just keep toggling it up until you get the gain you want. And the same for adjusting the white balance. You press the white balance there, toggle through 2 presets and a sort of sunshine and an indoor preset. And you can of course set a custom white balance as well, for which you need one of the assignable buttons to be set to set the white balance. So what you sort of do is go white balance, flick through to custom white balance, point it at a white piece of paper, and then press the white balance set. It's slightly irritating in as much as it means one of your 5 assignable buttons, for that is how many the camcorder has, pretty much needs to be that white balance set. So you're left with 4 assignable buttons that you can do some useful stuff with. But it's not bad. It's not bad at all. So speaking of the assignable buttons, you've got 3 here, 1, 2, 3. The one behind that is a toggle for turning the display on and off. And I don't mean the whole display, I mean the things that are overlaid on the display. So you can turn them off and just have a clear image of what you're shooting. So 3 assignable buttons. They're by default set to white balance, status, and low lux mode. Well, I don't know who makes the decisions at Sony for what these things should be set to by default, but as a camera person, those are not what I would want my buttons set to, but it's very easy to change. You just go in the menus, fiddle about, and you can assign what you want. Finally, on the side here, very standard little flap hiding the audio controls. 2 knobs. It's a stereo camcorder, so 2-channel audio, and you can have them either on auto levels or manual levels. If it's manual, it's on the buttons, and you can choose phantom power, also mic without phantom power, and line levels. And then finally, what source you want. It can be the internal mic, because there is an internal mic on the front of the camcorder here. It can be an external mic plugged in here and using the XLR sockets, or this camcorder has on this shoe here, it's not a cold shoe, it's a hot shoe. It has Sony's MI shoe technology. It's a set of electrical connections that means you can use certain Sony accessories plugged into there, like lights or radio microphones, and they get powered off the shoe, and also they send their signals back through the shoe, so there's no wiring sort of being dangling around the camcorder. And so you can set what source you want to record on that. So if you've plugged in a radio mic, for example, into the MI shoe, you switch that selector to MI shoe and then it records off that. So that's all fairly straightforward. On the back here, dual SD card slots, SDXC and high speed at that recommended for recording in its highest codec. I should mention, I suppose, what it records in AVC HD. They all do that. It's old hat now. But also, and one of the reasons why I actually think this camcorder is perfectly decent for what it is, it shoots in the XAVC-S 50 megabit codec, which is very good quality. If you're only after HD, if you're not bothered by 4K and you want a decent HD picture, XAVC-S at 50 megabit does a very nice job, and that is what this can shoot. But you will need fast cards. You need at least class 10, I think, and probably, better safe than sorry, make them UHS-3 as well. And they just push in there like any other card would. And the camera does have the facility to do relay recording, so go from one card, when it's full it flips over to the other one, or dual recording, so you get a backup. It's also got this nifty trick up its sleeve where you can assign one card to be recorded to when you press one of the record buttons and the other card when you press the other one. Sounds a bit weird, but it means that you can start something recording, just let that keep going. Put that on the B card, for example, and just roll to record the whole time you are filming. Meanwhile, you set up the main record button to go to the A, and that would be the main bulk of your shots. But if you suddenly remember you didn't press record at that vital moment, it doesn't matter because the B was rolling the whole time anyway. So that's a funny little trick, but it can do that. You've got headphone jack and a 2.5mm lank control socket, so you can plug in a remote zoom. I plugged my Manfrotto in, it worked absolutely fine with that, no trouble at all. Batteries, these are the legendary, they've been around for years, NPF style Sony batteries. Probably most people who've ever used a camcorder like this have got some of those batteries kicking around somewhere. As you can see, it comes with an NPF 770, but there's easily plenty of space to put in the much bigger 970s, and that will run you for all day. It'll just keep going. Outputs on the side here, don't be confused by this BNC. It's not HD SDI, it's composite video out with the two phono audios beneath it. But for something a little higher quality, you have got a full-size HDMI out. And then you've also got, what is that? That's Sony's multi thing, which is actually USB with some jiggery pokery applied. And there's the DC input if you want to power the camcorder off the mains. That's kind of it really for most of the controls. On this side, you can see it's fairly bare. You've just got the record button, got your zoom rocker, and then the final two assignable buttons, one of which, helpfully, is assigned to focus magnification, which is very useful when you're trying to get focus, and then the other one's for last scene review. Again, both of those are changeable, so if your fingers, like me, actually press that one in preference to that one, you might want that one to be focus magnification. Obviously, up to you. Try the camcorder. On top of the handle, it's very bare. There is a zoom rocker and there's another record button, and that's it. You don't even get on the side here, like you do on some, a little toggle switch to vary the speed of the zoom rocker. It's just those two controls. And if you think that looks bare, open up the LCD. Look at that. It's just this vast expanse of space where on, I don't know, PMW 200, for example, you would have buttons and buttons and buttons for playback and index marks and generally looking and doing things with your footage. This kind of has all that you need. It's just that you end up using these buttons through the menus to do it. So you've got left, right, up, down, a set button, and then go into the menus and a thumbnail button. It does the job perfectly well. It's just there are a few buttons, and you can see that Sony have economized by stripping this back to the essential functions. There's the flip out screen. Does a perfectly good job, actually. Nice, bright enough, you can see what you're doing. It is much better, let me tell you, than the Viewfinder. The Viewfinder really is one of my criticisms of this camcorder. This is horrible, absolutely horrible. Not only wearing glasses could I never quite get my eye in to block enough light out. There was always some sort of reflection going around. But the actual Viewfinder, dreadful. You can get focus and exposure with it, but it's clearly a very cheap and cheerful little display. Even as you move your eye or you blink your eye, you kind of see the image divided up into its component red, green and blue colours. It's very hard to explain and very weird, but it's not nice. You end up sort of staring fixedly, trying not to blink or move your eye so that you can see the image. But as I say, struggle with it and you can get focus and exposure. The other really annoying thing, and this is fixed, you can't change it in the menus, is that when the screen is out, the viewfinder is off. And if you want the viewfinder on, you have to shut the screen. May not sound like a big deal, but look, again, this is a camcorder you use for shooting news, live action things that are happening, when you will change from one environment to another as you follow the action. So let us suppose that you are filming outside, it's bright sunlight, you want to use the viewfinder. Now you go inside, you want to use the screen, you've got to flip it open. and now you go back outside again. Oh, you want to use the screen and it isn't there. You've got to fold that up in order to put that back. It sounds so trivial, but honestly, when you're out filming, you do not want to be opening and shutting that screen depending on whether you want to put your eye up to the viewfinder or not, because sometimes you just want to have a little peek in the viewfinder and check. Sometimes you want the screen open, and doing this is annoying, not least because as you are filming your event, you've got one hand on the focus here and you're holding the camcorder, and now you want to, oh, you've got to do that and do that. You're taking your hand off the valuable controls. What you actually want is leave that open and on, have that on all times, and you can keep your hands on the controls as the action happens, and then you're either looking at the screen or you can have a quick peek in the viewfinder. So Sony, if you are watching, don't know why you made this decision. Is it an economy on the battery front or something? But please, dear heaven, let us have both the LCD and the viewfinder on at the same time. It is honestly useful when you are trying to film some unfolding event that's happening in front of you. There you go then, that's a look round the outside of the camcorder. You can see that it's got all the essentials, and yet in some ways it is pared back. You're wondering, I'm sure, what the image quality is like. Do you know what? I've already mentioned it's got a perfectly good codec, the 50 megabit XAVC-S, and yes, the images are perfectly decent, I think. Nice and sharp, nice and detailed, whether it's on a wide angle or a long zoom. Perfectly good. You'd have no qualms about that. Let's face it, broadcasters these days will show mobile phone footage. Nobody's going to quibble about the quality of your footage out of both this camcorder on that lens and the XAVC-S codec. It does a very decent job. The zoom range, as already mentioned, is all right. 12 times will do you for most circumstances. You've got the clear image zoom if you want to get that little bit of extra. What people always ask about, of course, is what's it like in low light? There's a low light obsession. People don't want to add more light. They want to just film in the dark, it seems. How is it? Well, the lens goes to f2.8, which isn't the widest. My Canon XF200, for example, has a lens that goes to f1.8, and that does make a difference. What this does seem to have, and it's quite impressive, is, well, apart from the 1-inch sensor, which I've totally failed to mention up until this point, it's got a 1-inch sensor in it, which is nice and big. A lot of pixels on it, but a nice big sensor. And it's either similar to, or possibly even the same as, I'm not quite sure, the sensor in the compact little PXW-X70 camcorder, which I really, really liked when I reviewed. So it's a very similar or the same sensor. And what it means is that when you film in dark situations, yes, you can only open the lens up to f2.8, but you can add in some gain, and it does a very, very good job of adding in gain without bringing up the noise. Yes, you can see the noise. If you look at the image as you add the more gain, you will see the noise. But compare it to that aforementioned XF200, which admittedly has notoriously always had a noisy image, even in decent light. But the comparison is really very revealing indeed, for as you up the gain on the Canon, the image just breaks up. It's horrible, and it can't manage to do a decent auto white balance. This one, whack up the gain, and you'll have to put more gain in to give you an equivalent level of brightness in the image to match the Canon. But oh boy, you'll prefer the image out of this one, even with that extra gain. It masks the noise by some wizardry, I don't know how, some magic of Sony, where the Canon just looks grainy and horrid. This one masks it remarkably well, which again is an observation I made of the PXW-X70. You can stick in 24 dB of gain on this and not be offended by the image. Contrast that with the Canon and it's just horrible. And again, I say the auto white balance on this manages to work even in that low light situation, pumping in the gain. It keeps a good image. The Canon had my jacket looking grey. The jacket is green. This managed to get it correctly. So I'm impressed with this in the low light. It may only go to f2.8, and I'm sure there are better cameras out there for low light. But again, for the price, for what you're getting, it's very good. And I would be quite happy dialing in some gain on this to get a shot in dim situations. I'll just mention that while I was doing the tests, the shot with, I think it was 15 dB of gain on this was about the same level of brightness as what my eyes were seeing in the environment. And yeah, not bad at all. I think that covers most things, doesn't it? The general picture quality, the low light, the zoom, the handling, the characteristics. So, all in all, yes, it's an entry-level camcorder. Sony make no bones about this, but it does a jolly decent HD picture. It's at a fantastically low price. The lowest I've actually found was £1,289, including VAT. I mean, that's extraordinary. You literally would pay more than that for some of Sony's top-end consumer cams. And this one gives you all the facility and function you would want if you want this style of camcorder. So, yes, it doesn't shoot 4K. So what? Do you know, my corporate clients still ask me for a DVD. When we finish, they say, yes, send us a DVD. That's standard def. They haven't even gone to HD. I send them HD for the web, but then it gets embedded in a thing about that size. So for many aspects of modern work, 4K is so far off being relevant. I know. If you shoot 4K, you can crop in on it. There are advantages, but you've got all the bother of the massive files and needing the bigger spec computer to edit them. Unless you edit with proxies, then you've got to make the proxies. Look, 4K can be a pain. For many everyday actual uses, it's just not necessary. So if you want an extraordinarily good little camcorder for a low price, I think this does the job well. And again, if you're in education, some corporate work, or you're a video journalist, either for web or even for broadcast, this is practically disposable at the price. And you can pick it up, run and gun with it, get shooting straight away, no messing about. I like it. So there. Hope this was useful. If you have any comments or questions, drop them in the questions below and I will do my best to answer. I should point out, this is on loan from Sony, goes back in 2 days. So if you post in a couple of days saying, could you do this test? No, I probably can't because the camera has gone back. But I will answer you as best I can from what experience I have had of it. Thank you for watching. If you liked it, click on the old like button. Always appreciated. Cheers now. Bye-bye.